Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Rike Story, President Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is an old friend of mine, Rike Wootten, who is the President and Representative Director of Vantage Capital Markets. Is that right?
That is correct.
Fantastic. Rike, we've known each other a long time through JMEC, the Japan Market Expansion Competition. And you've been instrumental in running that organisation. Just celebrated their 30th?
That's right, the 30th anniversary.
30th anniversary, which is phenomenal. So thank you for all the work you do for that. This is helping.
And to you too.
Well, I'm involved too, but you're doing the judging, so you got the hard job. I just give the lectures and then don't have any responsibility. You know, you've got all the hard work.
They've got to listen to what you're saying. That's what it's all about, and then they've got to use that in the judging, right?
Well, it's a fantastic organisation because it gives. It used to be quite young people, but I notice the ages are getting quite diverse now. But it gives people an opportunity to step out of their zone of their career in one very narrow slither and actually broaden out and try other things and understand other markets, other industries. So it's quite a good program. I must say it's and its success, I think, shows how valuable it is. But anyway. Well,
more than that, 30 years later, it's, as successful, I think, as it was the first year that I was in. Probably more so now.
Really? Yeah, amazing. So how is it that you're in Japan at all? How did you wind up getting here? And give us a little bit of the backstory on what you've been doing over the years and how you're doing what you're doing now.
All right. So I started in Japan. I came here originally as an exchange student. I was at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, and they had a program coming to Japan. And I came here for 6 months in 1980.
So I'm wondering if Lewis and Clark had a program in Italy or a program in, Brazil or something. I mean,
yes,
I did, right? You chose to come to Japan. Why was that? Right. Or did they choose you to come to Japan?
No, I came to choose to go to Japan because I was very interested, one, in the country. A bunch of my friends had come prior and they said it's a great place. I should go and take a look at it.
So what year are we talking about here?
This was 1981. I decided to come.
81. So this is...
No, 1980.
80. So this is before the Plaza Accord, before the yen goes crazy and strengthens out of proportion.
The yen was
they start buying up the world, right?
220 yen to the dollar.
That's right.
You could walk down the streets of Tokyo and people would say "gaijin da."
Yeah, gaijin.
Little things like that, which of course don't, aren't in place anymore. I mean,
well,
Tokyo
we're doing
is now
our best to get back to
international
220. We're at 157, 158. So we're catching up again. Indeed. And so... as an exchange student, how long was the period you were here?
So I was here for 6 months.
Right.
And
That's quite a big chunk of time.
Tokyo, Kyoto, and Sapporo.
This is at high school?
This was in college.
College, okay.
Yes.
So they let you take 6 months out, basically a
That's right.
semester, I guess, to come.
The college, it was a trimester system.
Okay.
And they had 2 trimesters, and what they did basically was say, we will send people all over the world. They took a teacher, and they would send them to 6 different countries each year. That's why you might have heard Italy. That's why you might have heard Brazil. They had people in China. And I decided to come to Japan.
Wow.
And I came with our teacher, who is a Nichiren-shu Buddhist minister. And so we got to see a lot of things that I never would have expected to see and probably haven't seen since. He was Japanese.
He was Japanese teaching in the States.
That's right.
Wow.
And so he was from Aichi. And so we all learned Aomori-ken when we were speaking Japanese.
Right.
And so I did that. I was here until, August 1980. And I went back to the States thinking probably I won't come back to Japan unless I'm a tourist again. And I was looking for work. And I talked with a friend of mine at Citibank. And he said, that place is about to explode. You ought to go work in Japan. And so I came over thinking, this is great. I'm going to work for Citibank. They didn't have a job for me.
Right.
So I spent a year and I was teaching English, as many of us do. And I worked for Time Life Books for 1 year. And that's when Time Life had a really big operation teaching. And at the time, we were teaching all of the car companies to send their students abroad so that they could work in the auto plants that are being set up in America.
Oh, yes.
So that was fun. Exactly 365 days later, I was offered a job at Merrill Lynch. And I said, okay, I'm going to join that. And this was in April 1984, sorry. And so I joined Merrill Lynch in 1984.
Had you done business subjects or that type of finance, that type of thing at uni when you were studying?
Yes, so I was a business administration major.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's in your wheelhouse there. Great.
Right.
And so the job, Merrill Lynch, very good company, still here, still strong. What did they have you doing there?
So at the time, there were only 70 people in the company.
Wow.
And there were 3 branches. There was Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya. And basically what they said was, we need to find somebody who can speak Japanese. They said, do you speak Japanese? And I said, Yes. And they said, okay, we have 2 words we'd like you to translate. The first one is kabushiki. The second one is saiken. And so immediately sweat started pouring down my forehead. And I said, I don't know what kabushiki means, but saiken means recently. And that's the word saikin for those of you who don't speak Japanese.
Rather than saikin, yeah.
So if you don't know the word stock and bond and you want to work for Merrill Lynch, it was kind of a lucky, a lucky shot that I actually got the job at that point in time. So I did that. I joined in 1984, and I left Merrill Lynch Tokyo in 1993. So 84 to 93. I was there for 11 years.
Long time.
And during that period, we joined the Tokyo Stock Exchange. We set up, I think, 7 branches. And the company went from basically being a retail company to an institutional company.
And how many people did it grow to in that time as well?
When I left, there were 650.
Oh, wow. From 70 to 650. Wow.
Yep. And at the peak, they had over 2,200 people. So Merrill Lynch really grew over the course of time. They later bought Yamaichi. They then sold Yamaichi.
This is after the Yamaichi crashed?
That's right. So Yamaichi crashed.
99, was it 98, 99?
Yeah, I think that's about right. 97, 98.
So late 90s anyway, yeah.
And Yamaichi crashed, and Merrill Lynch said, this is great. We could get into the retail business. And so they bought Yamaichi. They couldn't actually buy the business and get into it for something like 9 months. And so by that time, all the clients had left.
Right.
And so Merrill Lynch ended up buying, a lot of
empty shell.
A lot of nothing. Exactly.
Well, Yamaichi did a great thing for Japan in many ways, and one was basically a hygiene factor around mid-career hires, because up until Yamaichi's crash, if you left a major company, you're on a spiral down.
Yes.
And there was no way back in because there was no mid-career hire for larger companies. You came into uni, worked your whole life there, and then you retired. And the idea of bringing in people from outside just basically didn't exist until Yamaichi and a lot of good people got thrown on the street who were in that finance area, and they got picked up. So that was really the sort of start of saying, oh, okay, we can hire competent people as mid-career. And then Lehman shock gave that a big boost. Not many years later, we're talking about 2007 now, 2008, right? Lehman shock and 2008, 15th of September, as I recall. And another big, outpouring of good quality people into the market, job market, Japanese job market, still not particularly mobile, but much more mobile than it was then, particularly for mid-career hire. So, yeah, Yamaichi, in a way, actually played quite a big role in changing the mindset. So, well done, Yamaichi, although they went broke. But
there's a funny story. When Merrill Lynch would try to hire somebody from anywhere, might be from Nomura, it might be from one of the banks, they would actually send their employees down to wait in the elevators of the Merrill Lynch building and say, don't go.
Really?
Yeah. And so we had a lot of difficulty hiring good people back then.
Wow.
It was a very, very different period.
Wow.
And then in 1986, we joined the Tokyo Stock Exchange. And that was when basically people decided, for one, actually, in the early 80s, securities companies were not viewed in a positive light. And it wasn't really until the bubble came around that people started saying, well, maybe securities are not bad. And they started to look at that more as a career choice. And then, of course, that's where the money was back then.
Lobby of the building to get
they did to stop people from boarding the elevators.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never heard of that before. That's like taking it pretty seriously, isn't it?
It is taking it seriously.
Didn't you just call security to throw these people on the street?
Yes, before we actually had guards at the front of the buildings, right?
Yes, that was sort of 9/11, wasn't it? Sort of brought all that in.
That sure is,
yeah.
Yes.
And what sort of role did they give you over the years? I mean, you started obviously fairly entry level, and you sort of, 11 years,
so I started,
quite a period of time.
I was a bookkeeper. I left Japan, and I was the director of operations. So I ran all of the operations for Merrill Lynch in Japan.
Wow.
I went to work for Merrill Lynch in New York, and I ran their global custody business. And the global custody business is where you basically, today it's a very, very big business. Back then in Merrill Lynch, it was a very small business. And so I did that. I did that for a couple of years.
And this is because they said, look, Rike, we want to develop you further. We want to give you some, home office experience. Or did you say, look, I'm done with Japan for a while. I need a break. I mean, why leave?
I said in 1989 that I would like to try working in America.
Oh, okay.
And so the company said, okay, we'll find something for you. Give us a little bit of time. 4 years later, they said, okay, we found something. And this, of course, was right at the bubble. Things were so busy in Japan that there was just no way they could take people out.
Right.
It was a very busy time. And so finally I said, okay, I'd like to go. I went to America. I was, at the time that was a very interesting place to be. New York was in a very serious recession, but it was a good place to be. I tried it for a couple of years and I said, this is fun. And then I decided I don't really want to live in New York. And funny enough, I ran into a friend from Tokyo who said, by the way, did you hear Barings collapsed? And I said, yes. He said, they want to find a new chief operating officer. Can I put your name in the hat? I said, sure. 4 days later, I was on the airplane on the way to Tokyo.
4 days later?
Yes.
Wow, that's a record in recruitment right there.
Well, they invited me over for interviews.
I see.
I got back to the States, and 24 hours after I got back, I had a letter in hand that said, we'd like you to come, and this is the offer.
And this is with
Barings.
Right. Okay.
This was right after Barings had collapsed. ING had acquired it. The name was still Barings.
Right. ING being a big British, Dutch insurance operation,
yes,
right? Huge company.
Right.
Or was a huge company then anyway, yeah. Well, that's interesting. And so you wanted, obviously, to come back to Japan. Here's the way back. And you're coming in at a very, renowned
very
company,
senior,
very long history. ING, another very big, powerful company. So they're very solid.
So the Barings company itself was very, very big in Japan. They had a very, very good reputation. They were good at derivatives outside of what happened in Singapore. They were very good at other things that they had done, a solid research house. And so the company, coming into the company, it was quite, it was a great job that was there. But because they had the problem, many of the top people had to leave. And so I came in and they said, okay, Rike, we've got something for you. If you can do the job, you can hire the people you would like to have working for you. And so I did.
Wow. It's interesting, isn't it? Like one trader actually brought down a storied bank of, many, over 100 years of history, I can't remember, but one person just destroyed the whole thing. But it was an opportunity for you in the end, wasn't it?
It was an opportunity for me. But there are many companies that have been like that. You had Nick Leeson bankrupt the company. You had a lot of guys. Daiwa Bank had a fellow who was falsifying records. You've had many people over the course of time that have done a lot of things which have brought down the companies entirely. But not all of them have led to a career path.
Well, maybe, that's true. Career path out of the company into somewhere else. And so how long were you doing that?
So I was in Barings, which later became ING Barings, which later became ING. I was there for 6 years.
Right. When did you leave ING?
At the very end of 2000.
We did a ton of training ourselves for ING for quite a few years until they had a few problems. We were teaching them different courses here, particularly Dale Carnegie course. And that was probably from about 2009, I'm guessing, 8, 9, after you'd left. So we had, they were a very good client for quite a long time.
Was it the life company? Or
yes, it was the life company. Yeah, it was the life company,
That's their biggest operation here.
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. And we did a lot of training for those guys. And so what happens after ING?
So after ING, I decided, I'd really like to do something on my own. So I set up my own company, a company called Gotairikiu Partners. And that's what I've done for many, many years. And that was basically a boutique.
Gotairikiu.
Gotairikiu. So actually it means 5 continents. But many of my friends have said what it means is Gotairikiu. So that's how
I never thought of it like that. Gotairikiu. That's great.
Yes.
Either way, it works.
Either way, what remembers at the end of the day is that people remember your name.
Yes. And this company's job was to do?
So we were doing basically boutique M&A and advisory. We helped small companies that may have had issues with wanting to sell themselves, that wanted to buy another company, or they had issues with their foreign counterparts. The key role for the company was basically to have one side that was foreign, one side that was Japanese.
And is the company still doing that as an M&A?
Yes, it is.
Because this whole M&A thing is really taking off in Japan. There seem to be more and more companies getting into the M&A because you've got this aging population of owners and kids don't want to take over and they're stuck. What do? And because they've devoted their life to it, they don't want to see it just shut down. And they're looking for somebody like, take over the family business and take good care of it and keep it going for the legacy reasons, I guess. So I'm imagining that would still have a lot of play in it.
Yes. And there's an awful lot of that. And we had a lot of the jobs that we did were workouts where people had difficulty with their partners.
Oh, okay. All right.
And, Japan was this great place where people said, let's set up a joint venture and a 50-50 joint venture. And then nobody could make a decision. Nobody could do anything. And we would come in and try to work out the situation and figure out a way to, to either put the business back on track or to shut it down.
Right. Okay.
So our biggest client at the time was Office Depot. And they had 21 branches around Japan, stores. It was not a profitable business. They decided they wanted to sell. And so we helped them find a partner to sell to. And that was a company called Kakuyasu, which is the delivery liquor company. Made a lot of sense.
I'm struggling there to see how a liquor delivery company takes over Office Depot, but anyway.
Okay, well, let me explain.
Okay.
Hub and spoke. What you basically have if you have a liquor delivery company is you have a lot of very good locations, and you could use those to actually deliver to restaurants or to businesses close by.
I see.
So the whole concept basically was just having central locations where you could go from one place to many other ones. And so the business actually made a lot of sense. They didn't ultimately use it that way, but that was what the general thought was at the time.
And so subsequently, then you've got this new or an additional company, Global Vantage Partners. What is that about?
So Vantage Capital Markets.
Vantage Capital Markets.
Yep. We're an interdealer broker.
You're what, sorry?
An interdealer broker.
Interdealer broker.
Yep.
Okay.
And
well, so explain to people what that means. Yeah.
Okay. So what an interdealer broker is, basically we work between two professional companies. So we do trades that basically are off the Tokyo Stock Exchange or off-market transactions. Normally they're derivatives trades. They could be something like a basket of securities of some type. And we would take a basket where people want to sell or buy. They don't necessarily want to show the market what they're doing. And so they come to us and we will find a buyer or a seller.
Okay.
The trades are all ultimately reported.
Yes.
But it's something that, they can do the trade off market. People won't see it until later.
Right. Okay. And how long have you been doing that now?
So I've done that now for 7 years.
Okay.
Yep. Since this company started. Originally, I was a non-executive director, and I became the president about 2 years ago. And
is this is not your own company?
No, I'm working there as the president of the company.
Okay. Right. So you're running the operation in Japan then?
Yes, that's right.
And how many staff does that require?
So we have about 12 staff.
Okay.
Right. It's not a big company, but this kind of a business, you're not going to have that many people who are working there.
Yeah. Well, thinking about your many iterations in Japan from when you first started right through to what you're doing now, how did you, or what did you find worked well to get the team engaged to follow you as the leader? What things did you find worked well?
The most important thing is communication. I mean, speaking actually, how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
A lot of times it was working with people. It was getting to know them. It was realizing that, in fact, I was not going to be here for, a couple of years and then leave. And at the time when I was joining companies, that was a real problem. Foreigners would come in, they would leave after 2 or 3 years, and people, they didn't like the guy, but they waited them out. And I was here and I said, I'm not leaving. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be working with you. And I would work with people. I would communicate with them. We would have barbecues together. We would do anything to basically create as much teamwork and camaraderie as we could. And that worked very well.
Is this back in the day when there were still things like company holidays, people going together on holidays, or, going to the pub, bar or whatever after work and, having meals together? That whole thing sort of moved a little bit now. Not younger people like, forget it, I don't want to do that. But back in that day, I guess that was fairly standard procedure.
In the 80s, when I joined Merrill Lynch, we were out every single night.
Is that right?
With people in the company. We were out, we were creating this as, what do they call it? Nommunication, which is a combination of drinking and communicating.
Yeah.
And so it was virtually every night that we were out with people.
Wow.
When I was in ING Bearings, we would do things a little differently. The salesmen were always out with their clients. That was something that didn't change. But I would invite, the salesmen or the operations staff or the research staff or whatever, and we would have, it might have been a barbecue at my house. It might have been something else something outside, where we would basically do something to just increase the communication. And that worked very well.
What other things you found worked well in terms of getting people engaged to follow you as a leader?
And the other thing basically is don't be afraid. If you have something you want to do, push forward with it, and don't be afraid to to explain to people why it's there. You've got to explain. You've got to be open with people and explain why you think is the right thing to do. Why you're going a certain direction, and that's very important.
And how
it doesn't
often,
mean that they're going to like that.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I found in Japan that the code word for "I don't agree with you" is "wakarane." I don't understand. So instead of saying "I don't agree with you," they'd say, "Well, I don't understand," and you think, "Oh, it's a communication problem. They don't get my meaning," and you're sort of working harder on, putting a bit more passion behind the explanation or something. And in fact, that's not the problem at all. The problem is they think it's a dopey idea and they don't like it, but they're not going to tell you directly it's a dopey idea. They don't like it. They say, well, they don't understand. So learned that lesson the hard way.
Well, one of the key things that I did was I would say, I want you to do this and I will take responsibility if something goes wrong. And that made a huge
in Japan
difference.
was that important?
Because in Japan, one strike and you're out. And that is not something, in foreign companies, in American companies, for example, if you do something and it's not successful, they may look at that as you're making yourself more experienced. You're not going to make that same mistake twice. But in Japan, that was not the case.
Well, also, I guess in foreign companies, there's an upside for risk taking. I mean, you are expected to grow the pie. You're expected to try things. You're expected to innovate. You're expected to take risks, and you're expected to take the responsibility for the risks if they don't work. And in some cases, it means you're out.
Yes.
In other cases, it's okay. Well, I relate that story from Lee Iacocca when they had some launch of a new model, completely bombed, did not work, and the head of marketing was called up to his office expecting to get fired. And he walks in, he says, well, I suppose you're going to fire me. And Iacocca says, fire you? We just spent $5 million educating you. So that's one of those sort of urban legend true stories. But you can imagine how that percolates right down through the company to everyone says, okay, it's not fatal to do things new and try and experiment and be innovative. Look what happened to this guy. So, we can keep going with what we're trying to do. But in a lot of companies, it'll be, you're out, So it sends a different message, doesn't it? Yeah. And anything else you found worked well in terms of getting engagement, apart from things you've already mentioned?
Well, I think these are very important. You want to have that. The other thing was we normally would have a meeting once a week, and we would just go through everything we knew that was going on in the company. So people always felt that they were a part of different parts of the company and what was going on. And that's been a very important part of culture overall. Because in many companies, you find that different parts of the company don't communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And if you have one place where you can actually say, let's have a meeting, let's bring in the top person from each group and make sure they're aware of what we're trying to do, that makes a huge difference.
And that sort of silo issue is not just a Japan problem, is it? That's
right.
A corporate problem around the world. But I think Japan tends to, I'm going to say, the group identification here is very powerful. So if you're in a division or a slither of the company as a group, you identify very strongly with that group and may not necessarily have much to do with people outside your group, because that is now your group that you hang with. So that silo thing can be actually accentuated here, I think, because of that groupism, so to speak. So in terms of, thinking about growing the business, growing the operation, being more effective, being more efficient, getting ideas, you're foreign educated, you're coming from America, you speak English, you got access to headquarters, what they're thinking, you can absorb a lot of information, you gain a lot of experience, you've got that diversity element in you by the mere fact you're not Japanese and grown up here. And so, generally speaking, there's always that little bit of edge, I think, around idea generation, seeing things from a different angle. But one of the issues, though, as a leader, is sometimes we look around that, oh, hang on a minute, I'm the one generating all the ideas here. Well, wait a minute, what are the rest of the crew doing? So what have you found works well to get ideas from people?
Well, one thing is, if you have a situation, ask the same question 3 times.
Oh, okay.
And see if you get a different answer at all.
At the,
So
you
like
mean
your-
three
like your earlier
times
question.
once a week apart, or consecutively in the same
consecutive.
conversation?
Ask
or?
a different, ask it the same question a slightly different way, and see if you get a different answer. And I
What
find
are we
that
trying to
made
do
a
there? Why are we
huge-
doing that?
Well, because you might find that in fact people all of a sudden realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe I can do that. Maybe there is a way to do this. And a lot of times, as you say, people have a silo mentality, and if you can kind of break out a little bit of that silo, you might find that in fact you can get a different answer.
And also, I think too, I mean, generally speaking, I haven't lived in America, but I imagine it's possibly similar. In Australia, the culture there is very much try things, find a way, can do, quite positive. So if you put something to Australians, their first thought is, okay, how can we make this work? Maybe we don't have the resources. We'll, get some sticky tape and somehow we'll stick it together and make it fly. Whereas in Japan, the first thought is no.
Right.
Just like the first thought is no, don't like that. Not going for it. Sounds bad. Sounds risky. I don't know much about it. Best idea, safest idea is negative. And it's quite difficult sometimes, and you get a bit passionate about something and you're sharing your idea and then they just say, no. And I think you're right. There's that natural first reaction is, oh, what's wrong with it? Guard against that. But maybe, as you say, with a little bit of time, they start to think about, is there a way we could tweak this? That maybe your 3-question technique gives them a little bit of time.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else around that? And just in terms of this overcoming this first response is negative thing here in Japan.
I was thinking back to a story which I'm sure you know about the Dyson company, and they have these bladeless fans, and you say to yourself, "Wow, that's a great product. It's excellent. Perfect for kids or something like that." And if you really investigate, you'll find it was a Toshiba patent, and Toshiba had this product, and the management said, nobody's ever going to buy a fan that doesn't have blades. And so they let the patent expire. And Dyson picked it up, and look where we are today. Yeah. But that's a classic example of Japan not wanting to take a risk because people didn't think of it that way.
And I guess James Dyson, as a founder, inventor, is someone who's taken risks from day one with coming up with very innovative products that no one else had ever thought about. So the natural culture play inside his company was fantastic. Thank you, Toshiba.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Toshiba.
Or look at Morita and Sony.
Yeah.
Not afraid to think outside the box.
Yeah. So what have you found in terms of harvesting ideas from people works? Do you have any sort of particular brainstorming methodology you found works very well, or do you have, suggestion box sorts of things, or I don't know, open door policy, or how do you get the ideas out?
Always have an open door policy. That's for sure. Let people come in, talk whenever you can. In fact, for the most part, for the last many years, I've never had a door. You're right there. You're always accessible. If somebody is, walking by, they can say hello.
Is that
or whatever.
the fact you don't have a door because you're working in an open plan, or
yes, it is
physically took the door off the office?
No. Actually, I'm working in an open plan.
Right. Yeah.
But that was the desire as well.
Yeah.
If you want to have an office or something like that, as soon as you close the door, everybody's saying, "Oh, what's going on behind the door?" And sometimes that's important. It might be related to salary or whatever, or
some very delicate conversation with a departing member of staff or something like
very easily could be. Yeah, but otherwise, there's no reason. You want to be, I think, as open with people as you can. And to be fair, Greg, one of the things about this is that's also very much the securities industry. If you think of the securities industry, the more secrets you have, the less successful things are going to be. What's happening in the equities? Why is it happening in the equities? What's going on in the bond market? Why are people selling? Why are people buying? And you need to really think outside of the box. And that's very different to many companies where, in fact, for example, Apple, if you look at the silos you're talking about, you don't want people talking outside of that silo. It's very secretive.
Well, in that securities industry, do they have methodologies to enhance that cross communication? Do they actually have some play they work that around, or is it just a cultural thing? How does that work?
I think it's a cultural thing. As soon as you walk into the company, you'll find that people are always talking. They're always brainstorming. They're talking about a different type of product. How can we do this? What do we need to do to make this a product that's going to sell to people?
Mm.
And it's a very different atmosphere in a securities company to what would be in an average company.
Mm.
You're always having new products coming out. You're always having new ideas that are there that are being generated.
Mm. Mm. And so if you think about building trust, I mean, you've moved through different positions within the same company. You've moved companies. You've started companies. And so building trust is important everywhere. And I think in a risk-averse culture like Japan, trust takes on an even higher degree of importance. And so what have you found has worked well from your point of view to build trust with your team members?
Well, I think the most important thing with building trust with team members is being as open as you can with them. You know, what are their problems? What are your problems? Making sure that you have good communication to discuss what they are. And hopefully you can both arrive at the point of where you say, you know, our problems are actually not that far apart.
How does it go though? You know, I run my own company, you know, and I have tons of problems.
Well, your job is how to communicate with people better.
Yeah, well, that's the point. And that's the sort of the nuance of it, you know. I can't really talk about it to my wife, even though I do, but she's not working in the company every day. So, yeah, okay. In some cases, I can't really talk to my staff about it either because, you know, these are certain things that at my level are a concern to me, and I don't want to create any issues for them. And so often, when you're on your own, who do you talk to? You know, like your therapist maybe. You have to go and get one, I guess. But it can be a bit of an issue around leaders and sharing stress, sharing concerns. There's no one to talk to. It's like they talk about it's lonely at the top, and I know what they mean because it is lonely at the top. Who can you talk to? It's very hard. I guess also with men. Well, I talk about Australian men. Australia's a very macho culture. You know, big boys don't cry. You know, soldier on. It's just drilled into you from the time you're a kid, as a boy anyway. And so there's not much sharing going on there. But what have you found works well to deal with stress and to deal with the strains as a leader?
Well, very, very, you know, interesting questions because, you know, yes, it is lonely at the top. And you've got a lot of things, you know, for example, oh, the company might fail tomorrow. What am I going to do? Everybody's counting on this job. How do I make sure that that's there? You can't talk about that, obviously, with people. That's just not right.
Destabilizing for everyone.
Right. You know, you've got to figure out a way that you can do that. And finding people who are in a similar position and all is something that's very important. If you can, to find a way you can actually talk with people. I think in part, if you look at companies or clubs like the Rotary clubs, they were all designed to be the top person in the company so that people could talk to each other about things that were actually rather similar. Are
you in Rotary?
I have been.
Have been.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
in
in it for
Rotary
15 years.
15 years. I'm still in Rotary, but I don't see anybody sharing their deepest secrets down at Rotary at my meetings there.
Yes.
It's always very light conversation, I have to say. But I get the idea that this is really
It should be.
I guess it was sort of an American way of overcoming the sort of craft organisation separation of industries. If you're a lawyer, only dealt with lawyers. If you're in the medical field, dealt with medicos. Accounting field, dealt with accountants or manufacturers or whatever it was. To actually have a Rotary that you're going across all these different industries and exposing yourself to people from different walks of life. And so in that sense it works. But what do you do? Who do you talk to? I belong to tons of chambers of commerce and organisations here, but I don't really find any group that I can actually, you know, have a really deep conversation about some of the inner, you know, problems in my mind about the business or whatever. So it is a bit of an issue. If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now.
So what I would have thought when you're looking at, who can I talk to? I've been in Japan a long time. This is my 37th year. People who I've worked with, a lot of them are the same people I've known from the very beginning in Merrill Lynch or in Barings or whatever. You can talk with each other. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to share the innermost secrets and talk about things like that. But it's easier because some of the background is similar. So you'll never find somebody who can sit there and say, how am I going to make payroll tomorrow? This is a real problem. That's something you've got to find a different group to speak with. But if it's general things, I find that a lot of those people I can talk with. But
when you talked
it's
about,
it's not easy in the same way.
No, it's not. And I don't know whether it's particularly because you're a foreigner, as a guest in Japan, part of the furniture here, you didn't grow up here. So you maybe just don't have those networks that maybe Japanese business people have, I don't know. But in terms of, come back to the question about trust, you said being open. I mean, there are limitations on how open you can be. We talked about that. But apart from that, any other things you found work well with building trust with people?
Well, I think, again, it's being open with people. I also, I'm very open. I'm not pretentious in any way. I don't, I take the train, I take the bus, I take everything to, to show people that, in fact, I'm probably as normal as I can be. I'm not sure that makes a big difference or not, but, I think a lot of things are, it's quite a bit of difference. Being the president of a company, sometimes people say, oh, you're shacho, you're arai, you're this, that, the other thing. And I yes, you might be, but the reality is I'm still human. We all still have the same problems.
And what about in terms
I probably
of...
didn't give you a good answer, but anyway.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of part of building trust is sharing, it's conversations. Often we talk a little bit about sharing weaknesses, vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And the business community I grew up in Australia, probably different today, but when I was growing up, unthinkable for the boss to reveal a vulnerability. Unthinkable that they would share that with you. The boss was the person who'd done every job in the company, every section, was the best at everything, and they were all knowing, almighty, all-powerful, strong individuals that you could look up to and follow, and they never showed any weaknesses, no matter how many they had, never revealed any of that. And so what do you think about that balance? The fear of, if I show my weaknesses, I won't be respected. If I show my weaknesses, my rivals will think we should get rid of you and I should be sitting in your chair in bigger companies. I worked in big companies. That's definitely how it works. They can't wait to get the elbows out and you're out and they're in. So what do you think about that ability as a leader to show some vulnerability, to show some weaknesses with the team? Where's the balance there, do you think?
It's a really interesting, good point. And I would have said one of the ways to build trust, as probably I heard from Dale Carnegie once, was, if you want to make a friend, ask advice. And sometimes that's the best way to actually, do something there where you can actually ask somebody and they feel you're bringing them a little bit closer into that trust circle.
And that's because you're sharing an issue and you're asking them for their input.
Right. Whether you use it or not is a different question, but asking them for the input is something which
Rike,
otherwise
I can tell
never
you,
get it.
I have given people
Plenty of input.
gold, sterling advice, which they never take any. So I often wonder, what's the point, but I get the point. Anything else you found works well in terms of dealing with this? The basic concept is, look, if I share a weakness with you, you won't respect me. As I'm talking about boss to staff now, right?
Yep.
That is a pretty basic concept that I think a lot of leaders have. But maybe because I've gotten older now, I don't worry about that too much. When I was younger, no way. But somewhere as I've matured, I've just gotten maybe a bit more relaxed. Maybe I've got nothing but vulnerabilities now. So there's no secrets. There's nothing to hide anymore. It's all out there. But how do you think about gauging that? When, how much is enough and what do you share and what you don't share? Where do you think people can draw the line effectively there?
Well, I'm probably with you. As you get older, you start to say, I'm not as worried about what's going on. It's a different story. But again, where do you draw the line? I don't know that I've got an easy answer. I mean, you obviously don't share things that are personal, that are going to hurt somebody else. And in many cases, actually, people do. They're a little bit too open. And so I try to make sure that you at least try to stop somebody if there is a problem there. But otherwise, be as open as you can with them.
That point about being too open is a good one, isn't it? I mean, if you do come across people like that, it is a bit confronting. It's like, oh, gee. That's just too much information. I don't need to know that. Why are you telling me that?
Right.
So where's your gauge on your side? You doubt that because it's gone over the line. Well, I have to say,
one time it was explained to me, Japanese versus non-Japanese, and it was a very interesting explanation. And what it was basically, we as foreigners, we have multiple layers. We're kind of think of a 1,000-layer cake or whatever. And different people you can bring into a certain layer and all of that, and that's something that's there. And so you'll never bring people probably outside of your immediate family, into the very center. The Japanese, by comparison, were ones where they basically you have one very big outside layer, and then you've got one smaller inner layer, and you very seldom will let people inside. But if you can actually get in, people are then open with just about everything inside.
It is interesting, isn't it, when you talk about trust. Getting into companies as a new supplier of services or products, extremely difficult.
Yep.
Once you get in and you are proven to be reliable, very hard to get out unless you really screw it up pretty badly, and companies manage to do that with a monotonous regularity, I have to say. But so there is that degree of trust. So the actual initial distrust is very high. So you've really got to work hard. But once, they feel comfortable with you, they feel, this is a low-risk decision to use you again. And we know who you are, and we know what we'll get. You're predictable, and we can gauge that. And so we feel comfortable with you. And I guess that's the same with bosses too. If the boss is predictable, they can gauge the boss. Like I often talk about, we do leadership training, that one of the things we have to be careful of as bosses is what's on our face. And this happened to me here recently. I wasn't aware of it, but I had a particular couple of issues which were really troublesome for me. And I get in early. And one of my team came in. He took one look at my face and said, "Are you okay?" I thought, I wasn't even aware of what was on my face. Okay. But obviously there was something on my face was telling him I had a problem. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's right. My job as the boss is to be like a no mask, with one positive expression all the time and not show my ups and downs because I have to be the constant in a way.
Absolutely right.
And the flip side is on the vulnerability. Like I tell my team, I say, look, don't bother asking me anything creative after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you need a creative input, see me the next morning. See me the next morning, because after 3, I'm a vegetable. And I make that statement. May not always be true, but I make that statement to say, yeah, I have rhythms in my work. Creativity for me is a morning thing rather than a late afternoon thing. I'm not Mr. Perfect. And it becomes a bit of a joke. But it is also a truth about my biorhythms too. But I'm happy to tell them that and say, well, or detail stuff, I'm a typical sales guy. Don't like much around the detail, like the big picture. And people start just rabbiting on about the details, like, stop right there, you're killing me. What's the point here, Like, I can't take much more of this. So after a time, people realize that about you, so they adjust themselves a little bit to how you like it. And you got to do the same thing with them. I mean, if they're incredibly detail-oriented and you come in very high level, they're not happy.
Right.
Or vice versa,
No, but the point you said right there is something that's happened to me many times.
Yeah.
With me, usually it's my voice. People say, "What's wrong? You've got something's definitely wrong with you. Your voice is off."
Right. They pick up on the voice. Okay, that's interesting. Well, in terms of culture, you've grown up in an American culture. You've experienced Japanese culture. You've had big company culture. You've got relative, your own business culture, smaller company culture, different cultures. You've got the Rike culture. What have you found works well to build a culture in an organization?
Each one's different. I mean, a big company culture is something where you've got to think of things in a very, very different scope. A small company, it's much easier in theory, though in reality it's actually not, because you get to know everybody a little bit too well sometimes. And so
why is that a problem?
Well, it's a problem, in as much as if sometimes being the boss, you've got to be a little bit more above what's going on. And if you know everything that's going on with everybody else, sometimes it's not as healthy as it might be to be one step above or one step beyond.
Do Japanese share, though? Because, one of the things that always amazed me was that you'd be working with people, think you've got a pretty good relationship, and then out of the blue, they tell you they've had a child, or they'll tell you they're getting married.
Yes.
Or whatever.
Or they got married.
Or they got married, yes.
Yes.
No, you corrected me there perfectly. They've gotten married. So that's a deal done. And you're always a bit shocked, like, you didn't say anything. And it's like, you're thinking in your mind, I thought we had a good relationship that we could share, but you didn't share any of that with me. And part of this is, if I get, stood up at the altar, it's embarrassing, or something happens with the child's delivery, that's could be, dramatic. I don't want to share that with people in case it's not all perfect. So often I think Japanese are not as open in terms of maybe sharing some of those things that we'd normally expect in a Western culture. I mean, we've got a 50% divorce rate in the West, so, we're probably a bit more flexible around these things maybe than Japanese.
If you don't like it, try again.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. 1 in 2 chance you'll get it right. And so, I just wonder about that in terms of being able to actually, get people to share.
Well, I almost think of that circle image that I was talking about a minute ago, where the Japanese, a lot of what they've got in the center, they don't want to show. And the vulnerabilities, like you say, maybe it's the fact that you've got a boyfriend, or maybe you're getting married, and you have always had this reputation as being, single, professional, and happy to do something, and all of a sudden, that's changing. Do you really want to tell people, is that going to change everything in the way that it's being done? And that may be part of it. It's just the way that they look at that and say, I have people I'm willing to bring in to a certain level, but not too far. So like you said, I've had people tell me as well, I just got married over the weekend. It's happened to me a couple of times. But, well, what do? Do you give them a present? Do you say congratulations? Do you... It's not an easy situation to deal with.
I guess the only time you really find out is when they ask you to give the speech at the wedding, because you're the president, right? You're representing their side of the family, and they're trying to show the other side that they're, we come from solid folk here,
Yes, exactly.
A solid career. Here's my shacho, here's my president here giving a speech in Japanese, for example.
Right.
Yeah, look at us, In terms of culture again, purposes are recently, I think, being rediscovered. You're reading a lot more articles around the importance of shared purpose, understanding of purpose, focusing on purpose. And this maybe came out of COVID, where people sort of wandered off home, and the sort of tight core started to disintegrate to some extent. And people became estranged. People became more introverted than they were before. People got a bit lost and trying to glue things back together. And this culture and purpose have got a close interaction. And the chore, the morning meetings, has always been a very traditional way in Japan of, as you have your weekly meeting, getting us sort of on board with where we are, but doing it on a minor level at a daily basis. And also, in many cases, reworking the purpose of why we're here, if that's built into it. Have you found anything like that which is good for building purpose in companies?
Well, I'm not sure. Building purpose, if you have a meeting every single morning, it is at the same time, even for just a few minutes, people come in. They will be there for that meeting, and that's sometimes a very important thing to have. I mean, COVID has completely changed the dynamics of things. People are still working from home. You don't necessarily want them to work from home, but it's a little bit hard to say, well, you've now built your entire, life around the fact that you're going to be home twice a week and your husband is going to be home 3 times a week or something. It's a very different story. So I'd almost think that having a reason for people to come in, even for a very short period of time, can be very worthwhile. But I'm not sure that answers your question. I'm not sure that's exactly it. But having something like that, I think, is very important.
When I was working in Osaka, Rico de Blanc, who unfortunately has passed away a few years ago now, quite young, sadly quite young, had a young family as well. He was the general manager of the Ritz-Carlton.
Oh, right.
And when I was down there, I was at an American Chamber function. He was the guest speaker, and he talked about their 12 principles of service.
Okay.
It was very impressive. And then I moved back to Tokyo in 2001, and he was actually the guy who opened the Ritz-Carlton here in Tokyo after opening the one in Osaka. And again, I attended, I think it may be another American Chamber function where, again, he gave a very similar talk on their principles of service, very impressive. And I was working for Shinsei Bank from about 2003. And I suggested to my boss that, why don't we have Rico de Blanc come in and talk about how Ritz-Carlton thinks about service? Because we're, as a challenger bank, Shinsei Bank at that time, very much a challenger bank, building a retail bank. They had retail customers, didn't really have a retail bank. Building a retail bank, that would be helpful. So he came and gave a talk. And then I convinced my boss to send me to Washington, D.C.
Oh.
They have a Ritz-Carlton training school there, and I managed to get a week there. And the first 3 days we were going through their principles of service, etc. And one part of it, though, they had, because they had multiple locations around the world, different time zones, different shifts in the industry, in the hotels, I should say. They would go through one of their principles of service every day. It would be like, that's the theme for today. And then they'd talk about success stories, good news, success stories. And they'd share these things every single shift, every single day. And it came up on a big screen. Here's principle number 5. And everybody and I know from the top down, because we're in the headquarters, so we joined the executive teams daily get together, which these days people might call it a scrum. This is before the word scrum was used outside of rugby, Anyway, and sure enough, the president was there, and then his secretary led the session because it goes by rotation. It's very democratic in that sense, and she would lead the session. And then whoever's next would lead the session. Might have been the president, may not have been the president. He might have not been, he might have been traveling, didn't matter. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty good idea. So when I came back to Japan, I instituted that into Shinsei. So we started having these shifts, because we had different shifts, and starting to go through our principles and work it up. And we do that here too. We have, every day we go through our vision, mission, values, and a whole raft of things that are important to us to try and coagulate the team's thinking around purpose and really drive that. We do that every day. And the rule is, if there's 2 people here, we do it. Doesn't matter, there's only 2 people, you do it. And it comes up on a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Rike today, Greg tomorrow, and so when you're on. And sometimes you go, I'm not here, I can't make it, someone takes me, or I take theirs, doesn't matter, we do it anyway. But found that very, very useful to drive that sense of purpose, because often too I found that I've told people, so therefore they know.
Right.
No, they don't know, And you realise as a leader, you've got to keep telling people stuff all the time, because I don't understand, I don't agree with it, or I don't remember it, or it hasn't percolated into me yet, or I haven't synthesized it yet, is there.
Right.
So this constant having to remind people. So that's what we found has been quite good. In terms of if someone called you up, right, and said, hey, listen, I've been posted, I'm going to be posted to Japan. I've been given this big job to run the organization here in Japan, but I don't know Japan, I don't speak Japanese, you've been there for 37 years. How can I be effective in Japan? What sort of advice would you give them?
That's a really interesting question. Go to Dale Carnegie.
Excellent advice. We can end the interview right here.
Yes. No, but if you think about it, that, Japan is changing and evolving quite a bit. And you think of, old Japan, new Japan, I think you have a real dichotomy there in terms of what you're going to do. So it really depends on what kind of industry you're going to be in. If somebody's in IT, I think that's a really interesting, exciting place to be, but it's, fraught with challenges as well. Finance isn't nearly as much fun as it was when you and I were in it. But that's the nature of the game. So things constantly evolve. I guess it really depends on the question or the industry that the person would be in. The most important thing.
They're still dealing with people, though. I mean, often in our business, people ask me, well, what industries do you cover? And I say, we cover everything. If there's robots involved, we're not there.
Right.
But if there's people involved, we're there. And it doesn't matter what the industry is, because people are people. And all the issues around people across all industries, all countries, all sizes of organizations, it's a common thing. So if you just take it at a sort of commonality of people are people level, what things do you think would be important to them as a new leader to be effective with the people they've been given to take care of?
Well, a couple of things. One, don't communicate as much as you can with the people in the company or in companies that are close by and all of that. Don't limit yourself just to English-speaking people. You know, even if you don't speak a lot of Japanese, you know, you can get an interpreter. You know, let them try. Try to find some basis of communication.
One thing about interpreters, I just give people a warning. Interpreters are interpreters. They are not business experts.
That's right.
So, but often, because they speak English, they become a little bit too much of a lifeline for leaders who start getting influenced by their opinion on issues which they have got very little experience and almost zero insight. So I just give a warning. Understand your interpreter's job is to interpret the words and put them into a language you can understand. But if you want advice, look for someone who actually knows what they're doing. Don't get too reliant on your interpreter. You're putting them in a position which they're way out of their depth. So yes, there's a limit there in what they can do for you.
That's right.
But anyway, please keep going.
No, and the same thing is, don't rely just on people who speak English. You know, your best people, the people who speak the best English in the company might not be your best people. And, you know, it's one of the most common things. You know, it's easier to teach somebody to be smart or to teach them a language than it is to teach somebody to be smart. And a lot of times people who speak a good language are not necessarily the smartest people in the company. And if they can't understand what the people are doing, you're going to miss out on a huge part of what's there.
What else should they be thinking about?
Well, understand as much as you can about what people are, where they're coming from. You know, if you're in Tokyo, obviously people might have a long commute. You know, if you can, you know, if you get a chance to, you know, to go out and see some of the areas that people are actually living, you might get a better chance to understand more of what they're actually facing every single day.
Get on the 7:30 train for you.
Well, that's it a few times.
And understand what that's like coming in, standing for an hour and a half.
Yes, as we have done many times over the course of our time here in Japan. No, you know,
having every centimetre of your body hard pressed up against strangers for long periods of time is certainly a revelation. But coming from a country like Australia with sort of open spaces, you know, it's like, oh my God.
Where you're going to get into a fight with the guy next to you because he's infringing on your space. No, I think that's a big part of it. You know, get a chance to go out and see what people are doing, what they're having to communicate and experience every day, because it'll make you a more reasoned leader, I think, when you're speaking with them.
Should they learn Japanese?
Japanese is a big investment of time and energy. I mean, you're in Japan. I think if you don't speak the language, you know, I feel sorry for you because you're going to miss out on a huge amount of what is here. But you know, if you're here for 2 or 3 years and you say, well, should I try to understand the language? I would say yes, you should try. But you know, is that going to be? Are you going to spend 9 months of your career doing nothing but Japanese? No, don't do that. You know, take a little bit and have fun with it. If you make a mistake in Japanese, find out why you made a mistake, and then laugh with the person who was laughing at you. You know, understand it. I think that's very important.
Japanese is an interesting language, isn't it? I remember once when I was at university here, I went to Jochi, and I'd learned some karate terminology in Australia, so I knew things like Maoshi-giri and Yoko-giri and, you know, Urazuki and these sorts of useful conversation, drop-ins you can't use anywhere. So I was really, I was learning the very, very basics of Japanese. And I remember there was an older professor, she must have been in her 50s, I guess. And I said something to her in Japanese. I was lucky to string 4 words together at that stage, So I was pretty happy I could get a sentence out. And whatever I said, I obviously had zero keigo, zero polite language or said it the wrong way. And she gave me the frostiest answer. The actual words, there was nothing wrong with the words, but the tone. The tone was beyond frosty. And I didn't know what I'd done wrong, but immediately I realized damn, I just said something there wasn't very good. And it took me a while to get the sort of keigo going. But I think, in some senses, Japanese are also very forgiving of foreigners. If you muck it up, or if they don't understand, they just look at you like they don't understand. You realise straight away, well, that didn't go anywhere. I better try again.
And as you know, the easiest way to know that somebody didn't understand you is when they look at you and say, "Nihongo ga jouzu desu ne."
Yes, your Japanese is so fluent. I wonder what you just said. It was so complicated, I couldn't understand it.
Yes, and you find these all the times. There are a lot of things where all of a sudden they go into something that is completely harmless as an expression. And basically it means either they don't want to talk about that subject anymore, or they didn't understand what you were saying. Yeah.
Any particular habits you've built up, personal habits you've built up over the year, or disciplines you've built up over the years that have served you well in business?
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah. Try something, because the Japanese are inherently going to be much more afraid. And don't be afraid to tell them, if you think it's the right thing to do, that you'll take responsibility if something goes wrong. Because I think that gives them a huge amount that allows them to trust that you trust them. And I think that becomes very important.
Gives them a lot of air cover to try things. Yeah.
I think so.
And also, I think when we do that and say things don't go perfectly and something is a problem, how we treat that is a big indicator of whether we're walking the talk or not, because sometimes the rhetoric's up here.
Yep.
Mistake comes down here. Next thing, whack to the side of the head.
Exactly.
You screwed up, So that sends a pretty clear message to everybody. Don't do anything.
That's right.
So you've got to walk the talk. If you're going to say that we learn from our mistakes, then we have to learn from our mistakes. The same mistake repeated a few times, that's a different issue. But generally speaking, that doesn't happen. Any other things, say, for example, around resilience? Because, in your time in Japan, you've been through recessions, you've been through dot-com meltdown, you've been through Lehman shock, you've been through earthquake, tsunami, triple nuclear meltdown, COVID. I mean, it's a long list of pain.
Long list, yes.
A long list of pain. So what have you found works well to keep yourself resilient?
Well, one thing that I found in talking with people is never say that you're here for 3 years. Never say that you're here for 2 years and you're really going to do what you can in that period of time. You're here for the long term. You really want to see the company. You want to see it grow. You want to see what's going on. And don't tell people that you're here for a short period of time. It gives them an excuse to not pay attention to you.
They just wait you out.
They wait you out.
That's a tremendously interesting idea you got there, Rike. We ain't going for it. I don't agree with it. I'm going to ignore it, and hopefully you'll be gone by the time you realise I've done nothing on it.
Exactly, and you get hide to death. Hide!
Yes, that's
good idea.
right.
Yes, Kento Shimasu.
Hi, I hear you, but I'm not going to do anything.
That's right.
And that's actually why following up is always so important, isn't it? Because you think, well, I've communicated exactly what I wanted. I've got agreement that we should do this, and they're actively working on it.
Right.
Until you find out none of those things were true.
That's right. That's right.
Nothing's being done on it. It's like, what happened about so-and-so? I haven't started yet. What? Deadline's here, or deadline's already passed.
Yes,
worse,
that's right. Yeah. And we're now embarrassed.
Yeah, that happens. That happens. Well, Rike, thank you very much. It's been great chatting with you.
Likewise, Greg. Well,
always looking forward to having this talk with you, and thank you again for the work you do for JMEC. It's a very, I think, great contribution to English speakers here in Japan, and also to give a mini MBA in a way. It's the lecturers who give the talks are all real-world practitioners. I mean, these people are, if you had to pay them what they're worth, these are seriously expensive people.
Yes.
If you had to actually employ them to give you this sort of information. And the organisation is very, very well run, very, very effective. And I go to the award nights and, I prepare them for the writing the document and prepare them for presenting the document. I don't get to see them do that, but I get reports from judges like yourself on how it went. So thank you. Thank you for your volunteer work on that.
My
because
pleasure.
it's unpaid, and it's sitting through 2 days of going through 12 teams, usually about 12 teams, very thick documents, and then, going through the Q&A parts. It's taxing.
But what I would tell you is it's great fun.
Great fun.
Sure. It's great to see the ideas. It's great to see the enthusiasm. And, it's the only place I think you've really got the equivalent of like an executive MBA course that you can go on and look at the people who are there. It's got a very good alumni network now.
Yeah. What you said the other day is about 1,500 people in the alumni. I think I heard that term at the awards night. Yeah. So JMEC.
Yep.
If people are interested to, broaden their career spectrum a little bit and step out of their very narrow band of what they're doing and experience things from a company point of view, and look at a company problem and come up with some solutions and write a business plan for them as a means of growth. It's not going to cost you millions of bucks like an MBA, and it's not going to take 2 years, but it will take a lot of work. And as I say, in the end, they do come up with some fantastic ideas.
I think so.
Really amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.